Hi, I'm Chris.
Hi, I'm Suleiman.
Hi, I'm Logan.
And I'm Tom, and this is our project on the Transcontinental Railroad. Oh, hi! I didn't see you walk in. What's the Transcontinental Railroad, you ask? Well, let me tell you. It was a project designed by the Western, Central, and Union Pacific Railroad companies. It was used to connect the western U.S. with the East. Now, the Transcontinental Railroad ran over 1,900 miles, and it shrank the boundaries between the citizens of the U.S. The Transcontinental Railroad was met with a lot of controversy, and dozens of laws and trials ensued. One of these cases was Munn versus Illinois. Here's Suleiman with more info.
Munn v. Illinois, 1877, was a case in which the United States Supreme Court upheld the power of government to regulate private industries. This case was part of a large movement known as the Granger Movement. This was a coalition of U.S. farmers in the Middle West that fought monopolistic grain transport in the post-bellum Reconstruction era. The case developed as a result of the Illinois legislatures responding in 1871 to pressure from the National Grange, an association of farmers, by setting maximum rates that private companies could charge for the storage and transport of agricultural products. The Chicago grain warehouse firm of Munn and Scott was subsequently found guilty of violating the law, but appealed the conviction on the grounds that the Illinois regulation represented an unconstitutional deprivation of property without due process of law. The Supreme Court heard the appeal in 1877. Chief Justice Morrison, Remick Waite, spoke for the majority when he said that state power to regulate extends to private industries that affect the public interest. Because grain storage facilities were devoted to public use, their rates were subject to public regulation. Moreover, Waite declared that even though Congress alone is granted control over interstate commerce, a state could take action in the public interest without impairing that federal control. Munn v. Illinois, one of the Granger cases, was a watershed in the struggle for public regulation of private enterprise. Later court decisions, however, sharply curtailed the government's power to regulate business. And that is all from Munn v. Illinois.
The Sherman Antitrust Act was an act which gave the government permission to break
The Sherman
our
Antitrust Act was passed almost unanimously in Congress in 1890. It was written mainly by John Sherman of Ohio, who was a brother of legendary General William Tecumseh Sherman, and it was also co-written by George Hoar of Massachusetts. The bill was signed into law by President Benjamin Harrison. The Sherman Antitrust Act made it possible for the United States government to break up monopolies and to stop trusts. It was not meant to harm the money-making potential of an honest-run, large business. It was just to stop corrupt business. This was a major problem at the time, and is still a problem today. The Sherman Antitrust Act faced many challenges over the years. In fact, it was amended twice, first by the Clayton Act of 1914, and later the Robinson-Patman Act of 1936. Though it was challenged many times, it is still in use today.
Peak versus Northwestern Railway Company was a case which addressed whether or not the government should be able to regulate the price of railway transport on the Transcontinental Railroad.
Now on to Peak v. Chicago Railway Company. The suit presented the single question of the power of the Legislature of Wisconsin to provide by law for a maximum charge to be made by the Chicago and Northwestern Railway Company for fare and freight upon the transportation of persons and property carried within the state or taken up outside the state and brought within it, or taken up inside and carried without. The case was to decide on whether or not the Wisconsin legislature had the ability to set the maximum price the railway company could set for transporting goods and humans. This would effectively reduce the price of transportation, taking away from the profit of the Chicago Railway Company. This would also take power away from the company. The question was whether or not the state had the right to do this. In the end, the council declared, start quote, "The privilege then of charging whatever rates it may deem proper is a franchise, which may be taken away under the reserved power, but the right to charge a reasonable compensation would remain as a right under the general law governing natural persons and not as a special franchise or privilege." End quote. This course case set precedent for future ones, as it does today. It helps ensure that prices set for transportation are appropriate. Thank you. I appreciate the time, Tom. I'll see you in the lunchroom.
Wabash versus Illinois was a case which disputed the Sherman Antitrust Act that we mentioned earlier. Here's Logan with more info on it.
Wabash, St. Louis, and Pacific Railway Company versus Illinois Wabash charged a company varying rates when they shipped goods from Illinois to New York. Illinois law states that shipments inside the borders of Illinois must have a constant rate. The state of Illinois sued Wabash in lower courts in order to stop monopolization of railways. The central issue in Wabash was whether railroad transportation fell under the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The courts ruled in Illinois' favor, 6 votes to 3. But if the case ended there, we will be hearing about it right now. So, Wabash appealed the case, and the Supreme Court accepted it. Justice Joseph Bradley said that the international transportation was not Illinois' responsibility, therefore giving Wabash control of their shipping rates. The ICC was later created in 1887 to control international trade.
The U.S. versus E.C. Knight Act was a dispute about monopolizing the distribution of products.
United States versus E.C. Knight Company, also known as the Sugar Trust case. The United States versus E.C. Knight Company was the first case that disputed the Sherman Antitrust Act. The E.C. Knight Company created a 98% monopoly of sales, but more importantly, distribution of sugar, after making a merge with smaller sugar companies. No, put down the iron, we aren't playing the game Monopoly. President Grover Cleveland sued in order to divest the E.C. Knight Company of its monopoly. The Supreme Court decided 8 votes to a mere 1 vote against the United States. Against the United States, that's a first. Under the Knight decision, any act against monopolies will be taken by individual states, but states cannot act against out-of-state goods. Although the decision was never explicitly overturned, the court later retreated from its position in a series of cases. And that's it for my part. Back to you, Tom.
The Interstate Commerce Act was designed to fight monopolies and high rates, which meant that the railroad companies cannot overcharge small independent farms for railway fare.
The Interstate Commerce Act was passed by Congress in 1887. It was designed to fight monopolies in the railroad industry. It demanded a, quote, reasonable and just, end quote, rate from railroad companies, but gave the federal government no power to set these rates, a serious flaw. The act, signed into law by President Benjamin Harrison, prevented railroad companies from discriminating against small-time farmers by making them charge an equal rate to both large markets and small markets, instead of overcharging small ones as they tended to do. It created the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Commission, which was designed to make sure that the railroad companies were following regulations. The act was later amended to regulate other modes of transportation. The law was actually a landmark when it was passed, as no federal statute at that time had been passed to regulate commerce. It was passed due to growing concerns about the growing wealth and power of the railroad companies. And that's it for my part.
Alright, now on to our mystery document. The rules here are simple. I'm going to read an excerpt from one of the cases or laws that we have learned about today. And Chris will have to guess what the court case or law was, and if he gets it right, nothing happens. If he gets it wrong, then he gets shocked with our shock pen. Alright.
It's like 1 in 6.
Alright, let's go. The quote is, "The privilege then of charging whatever rates may deem proper is a franchise which may be taken away under the reserved power, but the right to charge a reasonable compensation would remain as a right under the general law governing natural persons and not as a special franchise or privilege." End quote.
Don't know this one.
Go ahead.
Take it. It's a dud.
You want to try?
No.
Now Tom will give you a quick bit of info on our Connecticut connection.
Most of these acts passed post-1870. Most of the work done concerning railroads in Connecticut was done prior to 1870. This was known as the Age of Incorporation. The General Assembly in Connecticut chartered hundreds of organizations serving a variety of commercial, fraternal, and benevolent purposes. This had to do with extensive files, petitions, and drafts of general legislation.